that's way down the road. All right, welcome to Liberated Quilting. Some of you I don't know faces. I've met, no, not met you. Tell me your name. Catherine. And just for everyone, would just a first name, Val?
Sandy. This is my sister, Sandy.
Sandy, hi. Welcome.
Telling me all these things illegally.
Yay.
And I'm Karen. I'm Berta. I'm here with my daughter.
Yes.
Misty.
Yay, and Misty. Yay.
Drive right now. So.
All right. So just a little recapping. In the first two lessons, we talked about designing your quilt using color, kind of trying to let go of all the rules you've been given and told you have to this and that and the other. And because the way I look at it is that this is my hobby. We don't choose hobbies because they make us upset and angry and more stressed. We choose hobbies to help us fill our vessel, to make our juices flow, to give us the jazz in life. And so when we do quilting, everything's okay. And if it's not, yep, there's a stitch ripper, but don't use that generously. Let it go. Just kind of go with it and call it good enough, and love your fabrics, love the process, feel the creativity that moves us into that space that says, yeah, this is good. So the second class, we talked about squares in general, how to get there, just cutting a square, doing a 4 patch, doing a 9 patch, making some variations, a square in a square by stitch and flip. And stitch and flip comes in handy as we talk about triangles, because basically that's what it is. It creates a triangle. So I'm going to give you the variations of creating half square triangles. There are many. There isn't one that is the right way. It's what works for you, and it's what works for your fabric. So if you are doing a scrap quilt and all you have is this little piece, then you're probably going to have to cut a triangle and sew it to another triangle and call it good enough, and maybe square it up after or something like that. So that's our grandmothers, and any men too, I don't want to exclude them, but that's our grandmother's way of doing half square triangles, is they cut little triangles and put them with other triangles and then had the designs that we still see today. So that's one way to do it. The other is to think about how scrappy you want your design. So if you want your design really scrappy, then you're gonna cut as small a piece and only one, so as not to repeat it in your quilt perhaps. So that's gonna also dictate the method you use. Some of the methods that I prefer are methods that are kind of producing many at once. But when you produce many at once, you will have the same two fabrics that make your half square triangle. So just to be clear, a half square triangle is that. So it's a square, half of a square on the diagonal. So that's it. And there are, as I say, many ways to do it. So one is that you cut your triangle. Now when you cut your triangle, you always need to be aware of your finished size of your half square triangle, and then make the seam allowance addition. Now if you are doing a half square triangle and cutting that diagonal to sew it to another, then say you're going to use a 2-inch finished half square triangle. Then you would cut a 2-inch plus half, because that gives you seam allowance on both sides of your square, which is going to be 2.5. So you would take a 2.5, I don't think this is 2.5, but you'd take a 2.5-inch piece, and you'd either have such a tiny piece that you don't even have a full square, or you would cut it in half. And then so, now why would you do that? Well, again, if you want it real scrappy, if you sew this, well, this is for another example. Sorry, I need to grab a better example than that. Where are my things? Here we go. Oh, that's not it. Oh, that's not it. Oh, that's not it. Where are we here? Okay, sorry. That's what happens when you can't find, can't get your car parked and you're running late already. Okay, let's say we have a square and we have a contrast. Now, this is the question, contrast or not. So if you have these two squares, and just to be accurate, I'll give you an amount so that we're, oh great, this is some other measurement than inches. Oh, here we go. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do that. So this is, so this would be for a 3.5-inch finished half square triangle, so it is cut 4. Okay, so in being cut 4, you're going to need 2 fabrics. Now, do you always want this fabric with that, or do you want 2 half square triangles in your quilt that are exactly the same? If you don't, then you're going to cut it first. So if you cut it first, then you can put this half triangle with another light fabric. If you don't cut it first, then these two are going to be paired on one half and on the other, and I'll show you what I mean by that if you're not clear on that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
so
please.
If you were, I'm not familiar with the cutting beforehand, which is kind of a fun idea. So if you were to do that, you would still have your 4-inch triangle, you would cut it on the diagonal,
yes,
sew it with the quarter seam allowance, and you'd still end up with the 3.5-inch finished once you sew the 2 triangles.
Yes, because what you end up doing with this is you have your, I always use a fine tip indelible marker first of all. That's not necessary. Some people really like other markers that come off, or the blue marker, or whatever. Use whatever you want. You can use a pencil, you can use a ballpoint pen. It's going to be the cutting line, so it's not going to show anywhere, so it doesn't matter. Okay, then I mentioned this before about rulers. Boy, if you do a lot of quilting, man, get every ruler there is out there because eventually you're going to really find that that ruler is the one that makes this job so easy. And I really like little rulers that I keep in my sewing material, my equipment box. And sometimes this skinny one is the very best. Sometimes this is a little nicer because you're checking something else. There's also this, which is meant for what we're going to do, but I personally am not real fond of it. I find that what this is intended to do is to look down through the ruler, and you have a line in the middle, and you put it corner to corner. And then you just go one side and the other side and you mark. I find that it's too generous, and then you also have the space for your pen, and if you don't have your pen lined up right next to the ruler and you've got a little give there, it gets too wide, and then your sizes aren't as accurate. But back to my original comment, if it's not quite right, oh well, figure it out. Make it work and have fun.
What about like dog ears? Do you take that
I will
and do it?
show
Okay.
you that. You don't in the measurement. No, not in the measurement.
Okay.
But I will show you about dog ears.
Okay.
So if you're going to do a half square triangle with the what I think is simplest multiple method, so not just your triangle, then what you're going to do is what I do is I take my little ruler that's long enough to go point to point. So if I am making a great big one, and I'll show you one of those today, you're going to need a ruler that's as long as that diagonal. So you don't want to be getting it off. You look straight down. So we talked about this early on in accuracy. Yeah, all the people I know who are amazing quilters and perfectionists, that works for them, and it fills their vessel to be perfect and get as close to perfect as possible. Go for that, reach for that. All I'm saying is, if you don't quite get there, don't beat yourself up and be miserable. You know, that's not what a hobby's for. So, and that's not what expression in art is for. And this is art. So I go right at the tip, and I come right down, and I go twice, because sometimes you have some weird texture, or you think you're right on the fabric and you're not, and then it's all skippy. So here's my diagonal line. When I sew a 1/4 inch on either side of that line, I felt something pull. I'm like, what the heck? What's happening? You know how when you have a hair hanging off your face and it's in your glasses and your lips? And that's what it made me think of. What am I doing? Sorry. Little. Yep, I'm still a novice at all this video stuff. Okay. Another reminder, if you haven't already learned this little trick, if you lick your needle, put your presser foot down, you will thread your needle probably in one little slip. What happens is the spit in the needle eye creates a surface tension to suck the thread right in. So it actually helps you thread your needle. Yeah. When we actually lick the thread, which we've done for eons, it enlarges the thread. It soaks up the thread. So that's not going to be your best bet. Okay. Yeah.
One quick thing.
Yeah.
I found that if I take a white plastic spoon and hold it behind me,
Yes.
it lights up.
That's also real. Yes. Thank you, Karen. That was a great tip. If you have a little piece of paper or a white plastic spoon is a great idea, but something that goes behind your needle as you're threading, the white comes through the eye and it makes it more visible. So as we get older, we have to find these little things that fill our vessel. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go down one side. Now, chain sewing, super efficient. I am a get-her-done gal, and I like ways that make life fast. Not life fast. I don't like life fast. But sewing. I like quilting to be, oh, yeah, there. Okay, another one. Let's go. So what I just did is you can have a stack of 2 colored pieces ready to roll. And so now here's my line I drew, and then I sewed, using that line as my seam allowance, and sewed 1/4 inch to one side and 1/4 inch to the other. I use a scant seam because as your fabric bends to fold apart, ta-da, you have a half square triangle. And not only one, but 2. So we have 2. And then on, okay, I don't wanna, I'm tangled, I see, I have, okay, sorry all of you watching. This is like, okay, how goofy can I get? All right. So now, do you have to be super accurate cutting this line? No, it's your seam edge, and it's already been accurately assessed for sewing. So, you know, do you want to be accurate? Yeah, you want to, but you don't have to get yourself all in a bunch about that. Okay, now that was just cut right down the middle. Now I have 2 half square triangles. This is the most basic in multiplicity, but I do have 2 half square triangles that are this combination of 2 fabrics. In a larger quilt, that's probably not a problem. So this will give you a nice speedy method for making a couple that are the same. Now, dog ears, good, or puppy ears, or whatever people need to call them to be happy, is if you look right here, there's this little point that comes beyond the edge of the cut. And voila, it's off. So those are called dog ears. It's kind of violent, but cut off the dog ears, but yep, there we go. Yeah, whack them off. So now I have the seam following the square line. If you don't do that, I have done everything sloppy as sloppy can be, and I've done it really, really well. And I know how to do it well. I've sewn my whole life. My mother was an amazing critic and teacher. I'm not sure if I'd put them in equal balance, but anyway, she was a wonderful seamstress and knew how to do it all perfectly. And so I do know how to do that, and I know there's a time and a place to make it be that way. But I've also made quilts that I was in a real hurry to do, and I didn't cut my little dog ears off, and they were bulky, and what happens is you have all that extra seam fabric when you sewed them all together, and you got kind of a poochy little spot. So it does get, it shows, but if you quilt it and you quilt over that, it tacks it right down. And it's not the end of the world. So if you forget to cut those dog ears off, you'll find it's bulky. You can even have chain sewing lined up and realize, oh dang, I didn't cut those off. Just cut them as they come to the sewing machine and trim them off. Perfection cutting in this one, 45-degree angle, not important. Doesn't matter. So now I have these 2. That is the first, I think it's the first method I have on your sheet. For those of you at home, I did send it to you guys, so if you want to have it available, that's fine. Although I do want to say some of the charts and drawings, I don't know how to do those. So they did come straight from Pinterest, and I did acknowledge the source with their websites, and please utilize them. There's lots more on those websites, and the organizations that do those diagrams and formulas, they have figured this out. So helps me. So this concept of that diagonal now helps us realize a couple other ways to do it. So someone tell me what the next list is. Well, I mean on this here. So we have single diagonal on a square and X on a square. Okay, that is my, yeah.
Do you always press toward the darker triangle?
There is no always.
Okay.
Nope.
Do you ever press a seam open?
Yes. Yep, sometimes. If you are going to have a lot of bulk, pressing them open usually helps reduce that in those multiple spots that seams come together, like pinwheels. But I rarely open seams because it is the weakest finish on a quilt. Where you have an open seam, you are at some point looking down where the fabric has opened, and you can see light. I mean, there's space between the stitches. So that if that wears, then you have a popped seam, and your batting is the only thing behind it. So yeah, I'm a durable gal. I like to make my quilts so they last. And one of my prideful moments was to actually hand Hillary Clinton a quilt that I made for her. And she was very, very gracious and wonderful. And when she got it, she was so appreciative. She goes, "Somebody get me something to put this in." I said, "Oh, it's just a quilt. If it gets dirty, you throw it in the washer." I mean, you don't, but someone else throws it in the washer. And that's my feeling on quilts. They, people, "Oh, well, how do you," I don't make heirloom quilts. Some people do, and I know some amazing quilters who have made quilts that have won national contests, and hats off. I totally respect that, but that's not what fills my cup. So yeah, so seams pressed open, it's probably more of them have happened by accident than by design. Okay, so, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
Before you go on.
Yeah.
On the first one, I wrote down 2.5-inch square would make a 2-inch half square triangle.
No, not necessarily. When I was describing, I'm sorry, let me back up. When I was describing the cutting in half, it would be that you were cutting that piece to go with another piece separately. Okay, so on these, here's the formula. Finish square, whatever size that is, plus 1/2 inch seam allowance, plus 3/8 inch. So if you want, and I'm sorry, I think I even, my brain was racing, which it does, and I got that mixed up, so I'm glad, thank you for saying that. So when you're cutting this style of two partners like this, that's how you measure the square, okay? When you are cutting just to make your triangle, I'm gonna pause. I can feel my brain going disorganized and going, I'm gonna tell you the wrong thing. So I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that individual little piece that you have in your scraps, and that's the only piece you have left. Because I think I gave that to you wrong. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna have to always make sure the seam allowance is there. And here's the thing about math is that when my brain isn't racing, I'm actually pretty good at it, but distractions happen, and if it's not right, then stop, and instead of, oh, I gotta take this apart, stop, take it out, measure it, and figure out, okay, what did I do there that didn't make it what I wanted? And remeasure, figure it out. Yeah, actual hands-on, visual, tactile experience.
Do you use the tucker trimmer at all?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't. I might like it. I don't know. But
you seem like
thank
you're well
you.
versed enough in it, but I think for someone that's a beginner who has like a hard time
Good
squaring
point.
things up.
Oh, I don't even square stuff up.
Sure.
I don't. And they are not square. Here's the story. I had all kinds of leftover half square triangles, because soon you will hear that when I started sewing, quilting, I fell in love with half square triangles. And then, voila, here is half square triangle paper. And I bought every size roll that one could get and made half square triangles like someone's a chain smoker. And I just loved it. And I kept saying, it's magical. It's magical. All you do is cut a big chunk of fabric and another one, put them together, and you end up with this. Look. And I'm fluffing up all these half square triangles, and my husband's going, call the doctor. Note to self, this is not a medication issue. Anyway, so this, as crazy as it looks, is wonderful. So you have, and I'm not going to cut it, but you have a piece of fabric that you might decide, how many do I need? And you just cut a small piece, because that's how many you need, and you put it down on a piece of fabric that's only like a 1/2 inch extra around the outside edge. So it's really good for waste. This method is super for waste, actually. You have none. But let's say we're going to do these two fabrics. And now we have the wrong side showing, which we don't. And then I'm going to cut, just this little section of fabric, because that's how many half square triangles I need. I set it down on top, I pin it, and I start in one corner and follow the arrows. There was a Sesame Street song my kids used to, follow the arrow, you know which way to go. And that's all you do. And you just go in and out and in and out, and you follow the arrow, and you go all the way through, and you get right back to the spot you started, only the other side of the cutting line. And then when it's all sewn, it's all sewn, and you've sewn on the sewing, the dotted lines. Then you take it to your cutting mat and you cut on the solid lines. And then you have all these half square triangles, like magic. And they're all ready to go, and they're really quite accurate. Okay, so that's one method, and you can, and any of these methods, I know I'm zipping through fast on them, but any of them, if you look up half square triangle paper by the roll, you'll find a tutorial. And it will give you absolute straight-on viewing of how someone else might do it. And so when you get that, then of course you do have to tear the paper off. That gets torn off, and that's a waste. So you might want to think about that if you're making a queen-size quilt of these little teeny ones. That's a bit of a struggle, but they're good. They're good and they're accurate. So I had bags, grocery bags full of half square triangles. And then I had a need to make a very quick wedding quilt. And so I went down, and a wedding gift, and I went, oh, I have those half square triangles. So I threw them all together, and I'm sewing. I'm like, whoa, these don't fit real well. Here's my theory on not quite the right length. Pull it, ease it, tug it, set it, do whatever you have to. Use steam and get it to stretch or get it to ease. Fabric has a weave, it has a life, it has a give. And, if you're trying to go too far, of course it won't. But lo and behold, I kept going, these aren't working real well. And even I noticed. And so I started measuring. There was as much as a 1/2 inch difference from some to the other. I got them all sewn together, I quilted it, and I'm telling you, you wouldn't have known. So that's my message, is have fun. Make it work for you. And if you do want to learn the perfect way, take the time. Measure twice, cut once. It's that old adage of don't get rushed and let your brain go wildly distracted and be wacky about it, but take your time and be accurate. And if it's not right, don't throw it out, but stop and think, okay, what do I need? Where is this falling apart? Is it my seam allowance on my machine? use graph paper, 1/4 inch square graph paper to measure your 1/4 inch seam. Mark it with an indelible marker on the base of your machine. Do all those things to help the accuracy. Life will be easier. So I don't want to ever give someone the message of any old thing goes. But I do want to say that there's a lot more room than some people who are sticklers with the rules would like us to know. So,
Seems like the new machines, at least the one that I have and the ones I've looked at, they don't have a 1/4 inch on that plate.
they don't. And what I do is I take my graph paper and I mark it. See these two lines? I mark it all the way down the front of my machine so I can see even when something's longer.
What about a 1/4 inch foot? Do you ever use that?
That's what this is,
Okay.
yeah. But a 1/4 inch foot metal, it has a rounded edge, and so if I'm a little off to the side with a sore neck, I might not be getting that nice, clean 1/4 inch. So know that those are the things that make the difference. But, and if it's not working for you, step back and look at where can I do this better? Where can I do it more accurately so it works for me? Not because somebody else told you that's the rule and it's not perfect. Okay, so then we go to a very favorite method of mine. And these will be smaller, but I have these squares, so I'm just going to use them. These are on the diagram, the chart that shows an X. So on this, we're going to sew around the 4 sides. And then after sewing around the 4 sides, cut a diagonal. And you will get 4. Now again, if you want more mix-up in your fabric, you're going to have 4 that are exactly the same combo of fabrics. So that may be too much. That may be something you don't want. But if it's about making, like I love to make these pot holders. It's a friendship star. I love them. I love the friendship star is one of my favorite blocks. And so I just make them when I'm feeling a need to just mindlessly go about it. And this is the method I use. Then I have a pile of all of these here, all of these, and I throw them in the box and I grab and I put them where the half square triangles go. So there's a half square triangle on each of the 4 points of the star. There's a half square triangle on each of the 4 corners of the block. And then there's a solid square of fabric in the middle. That could be your background fabric, it could be your print, it doesn't matter. You can use all one color. If you want it not scrappy, you can use the same 2 fabrics and roll out the barrel, and you can make a ton of these in a hurry. So, and this is actually the same. If you look at any one of these squares, that's what this method is. Yeah.
What size triangles are those?
These are finished 1.5s, I think. No, sorry, these are finished 2s. Yeah. And then this is, can't turn that many times. Okay. This is a 4-inch square. So a 4-inch square gives me a 2-inch finished. I said 2, right? Yeah, 2 finished. 2 finished. So when you do a 4-inch square and sew around the 4 edges, which, let me take a second. Here we go. I have one done. And then you cut, bump, bump, like this. I love my 12-inch ruler. It's great for just easily grabbing it and having it long enough to do most diagonals. And so I line it up on the line. And this is a lovely tool. It's the Lazy Susan. Now you can buy a mat. In fact, Confident Stitch has them and they're wonderful. and the mat itself is affixed to the Lazy Susan, and it's very sturdy, and it's really a nice tool. I grabbed my makeshift one because I also like to share with people. I got it at a yard sale for $1, and I have my mat that I put on top. The downside of this makeshift is, as you can even see, it just droops off to the side, and if I'm not visualizing where that support is, I might have a weird little mistake or even an accident. When you're using a rotary cutter, you want to be safe. That's super important. It is a razor blade in a circle, and so so here's the diagonal cut with the 4 sides, and now I have these. And what I do as a fast dog ear trim, I think it in my head and it doesn't sound awful, but whenever I say it out loud, it just feels like a really violent thing, is I have 4 of them stacked, and I go zip, 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 and I go back again, zip, 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 and zip. That one maybe needs a little extra, okay. So that's kind of a fast thing. And what I do if I've made a whole bunch of them is I'll, in the evening just sitting and watching TV with my husband, I'll take them all that need dog ears. And of course, he's not real thrilled. We have this like confetti that goes everywhere. But I do know how to use a vacuum cleaner. I don't very often, but I do, and I can. So that happens. So then I have those little trimmed pieces, so they're ready to go. So these are done. Okay, the next method is, thank you so much, strips. So strips are really fun, and they're great to use. Why do you use them? They're great to use for a feathered star, because you're gonna you can do one scrappy, but most feathered stars are pretty organized in their fabric choices, and most of what you're gonna have is gonna be, and there aren't instructions on this one. I looked and I couldn't find any drawings or anything, but I'm sure there are somewhere. So what you have here is 2 strips, and the measurement is from this cut edge where the seam is to this point, the point of the fabric. So that's important to keep in mind. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut your strips. You're going to set it down, and you take and again, the importance of having the right ruler. So you're going to have your 45-degree marked on your ruler, either this, or this is also a nice tool where you have the degrees, 60, 45, 30, so on. You're going to take your 45-degree line and line it up on the edge of your fabric, and then you can mark or just straight cut, just cut. So you don't have to mark, but I've marked it to show you that that's what is going to end up being the use. Now, if I'm doing a feathered star, the little half square triangles on the edge of a feathered star, this one, these, they're all the same 2 fabrics, so it's super efficient in the use of your fabric, and it's and they're tiny. They're usually quite tiny. So if your actual star is smaller than this, then your little feathers are even smaller. So sometimes you can, feathered stars. I have a dear friend who is expert at feathered stars. And if you, I want to say, is it Marcia McCloskey who does little feathered stars? Does that ring a bell? I might be wrong. Sorry, Marcia, if I'm giving you the wrong credit or whatever. Anyway, so you have your strips. Now this is how I do it. I sew both sides. Then I'm worse than Eleanor Burns. Did anybody ever watch her videos where she just tosses her extra fabric over her shoulder? I love her. So when you line up your 45 degree, here I'll do it right. I've got it marked, so I'm cheating. But when you line up your 45 degrees on the edge of your fabric, looking down here, bottom edge, and then boom, your cut is going to be 45 degrees. So it's going to be, oh my gosh, I sewed this edge too. Guess what? It's only 4 stitches. Pull it apart. So that's why you sew both sides, because then your next one, this side is going to be the long seam. So it's super efficient. It's a super efficient way to do it. So now I have a half square triangle. Okay. So this is a nice method for no variety, less variety. The paper is a good method for less variety in fabric. And this is a really good method for teeny tiny, because you don't have to manipulate little teeny tiny cuts except on that straight row. So it's a cool method to use. But I rarely use it because I made one feathered star and said, it's done. No, I'm not done. I will do another one. I loved it. And my friend taught the class, and it was just like, oh my gosh. The design, whoever thought of a feathered star, holy buckets. It's a sweet, it's so the feather of it just lightens it. It just is so, such a nice design. Anyway, okay, so there's that. This one I made with the roll paper, because this one has 3 fabrics, and that's it. I don't know where top and bottom doesn't matter, but this is, I think the name of this, it's an old pattern, it's Shadow Star, I think. And what it is, if you look at it, it's one large star, and then the blocks that create the large star are smaller stars. So this has the light combination, so you have a print that is going to go with this solid and this solid. And you have half of this is going to be those light ones, and half of this is going to be the dark combo. And so then you create an additional half square triangle, not in any way we're learning, but just by the structure. Wow. Isn't that fun? Super cool. It is. And the roll paper was a great way to do something like this, because you have 3 fabrics. You have 1 fabric that gets twice as much quantity, and then the other 2 mix up with it. So it's super. That was a class here in Missoula by an amazing quilter who's now passed, and that's what happens when you get old.
In a situation like that where you have like a solid block in the design, to do an actual half square triangle with 2 of the same fabric, or are you just cutting the square?
So
I think I saw one of those on there.
nope.
It would be like the corner. Like, would you do a half
This,
square
oh,
triangle to get
this
there?
one?
No,
these?
Yeah, in the middle.
No, because this is the block here.
Okay.
And so the block is this square,
Yeah.
and all of them are half light, half dark. So this, even though 2 lights are next to each other,
Above it though.
above it.
But like
the
solid.
outer corner.
Oh, these here.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, but in this one, the outer corner is a half square triangle like my friendship block.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could, you're right, you could. And you could, in that one, just do the 2 fabrics, but you wouldn't, it's kind of the whole intent, I guess, of this design is that it is sort of like a, oh, I get it. It's that way. And that's how it works. But thank you. Yeah, you're right. In each of the blocks, these 2 corners are a solid fabric, and they, you know, but the giant star, the outside corner, is a half square triangle.
I guess, sorry if I'm not articulating my question. So for those solids in those 2 corners, are you just cutting a...
Yeah, you're just cutting a square.
Okay, you're not
Yes.
making a half square triangle?
No.
Okay.
No, thank you. No, they're not a blue to blue half square triangle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with me on that, and we got that figured out. Okay. So then the next way is, triangle paper. I gave you that one. I jumped the gun. Sorry.
Rectangles.
Oh, rectangles.
Yeah.
I don't like rectangles this way, but I'm going to show you. And there is a drawing, and I can't remember if there's a chart in there on this one, but there is a chart somewhere on Pinterest that give you the dimensions of how to get it right. It's cool to understand that when you have rectangles, they don't go together like squares. They're not gonna. So when you understand that, I think it helps then, no matter what method you use, whether you cut templates or whether you cut rectangles and cut them in half and put them together, or no matter how you do it. But, so this ends up being here, and what you'll see is you don't get that full length, and you don't get the full length up here. So the measurement is a lot trickier to figure out, and I just wanted to show you that this is actually what's happening. However, better ways to do it, in my opinion, and that is that is to use a template and I have one, here it is. So this is I always get mixed up on whether they call it 30 or 60 because it's the other side of it is the other. So anyway, this is a 30, and so you have, I'll do it this way, you have it here. Now, one of the things you want to be careful about with this template is if you are, as I'm going to explain in a sec, if you are making the 30s and, oh, sorry. Whoa, we are not cruising. If you are using 30 degrees and 60 degrees together to make this. So this is basically 2 rectangles together, okay? But this is the 60 and this is the 30, okay? So when these go together, you use the template for the center, but you have to remember that these are going to have a right and a left. This piece isn't the same as that. And those of you who were in our Block of the Month class, we had a little frustration with that. But anyway, so you want to think about if you're cutting a whole lot of scrappiness, and maybe these are different fabrics even, that you're doing it in the right direction. You're giving yourself check 1, check 2, check 3. Yes, that microphone's on and we're ready. Okay, so rectangles, you basically use this half of this set. Whoops. This set. All right, so again, a good ruler, cool rulers. And this is the Tri-Rec tool. And Confidence Stitch, of course, has all kinds of cool rulers out there. All right, there's that one. So rectangles, and then the 30-60 degree gives us a really fun option for a star that is elongated. So you have what you would have is this would be your star points on the 4 sides of this square, and then you'd use this fabric as your square in the corner. And well, that's one way to do it. There's probably many ways, but that is that and a 9 patch is the 54 and fight. I don't know that, whatever. Anyway, it's a block that is a classic, and it gives this illusion of a curve by the way that the points connect together, and the 9 patch follows the design. It's a really fun. It's a really beautiful star, and the elongated tips allow you to make it bigger if you're into that and getting a bigger star to have to only do 4 of them in a baby quilt or something, because it maintains a fragile look. Kind of has that effect of the feathered star because you have these points that become really powerful. So that's a fun design to use. And then we have, what are we up to next?
Quarter triangle.
Oh, yes. So there is paper that's called not half square triangle, but quarter triangle. And what it's going to do is take that 3/8 inch that you add on in measurement and add it again. And so there are a couple ways to do quarter squares, which also create what can be known as the hourglass. And the hourglass is, okay. So if I take my 2 half square triangles and I put them together with the seams nested nicely close together, and then I mark that line, and so on either side, then I end up with this. So I have quarter square triangles. Now what you have to do is you have to figure they get eaten up twice. So where you add the 3/8 on the half square triangle, you add twice that, so 6/8 or 3/4. So you add 3/4 to the original squares that you're cutting, so plus your 1/2 inch already. So you have your finished square, 2 inches maybe. You have the 1/2 inch you add, 2.5 for any piece of fabric that's going to go in, plus whatever you're doing for a half square triangle, you add 3/8. For a quarter square triangle, you add 3/4. Okay? So that gives you the classic hourglass, and the hourglass is usually contrast in one direction to the other direction. So that's the hourglass. There's another way to make an hourglass, and I presented this at the last class, and that is if you're doing the contrast like this, you have a 4 patch and a 4 patch. You sew around the outside edge just like we did with half square triangles, and you cut zip zip, and what you end up with is, let's see, I gotta get them right here. There and there. So cut zip zip, and you end up with the hourglass. So you have 2 4 patches sewn right sides together, and your light is going to be under your dark is going to be under your light, and then when you cut the diagonal you'll have the hourglass. So that's another way to do it. That is a Missouri Star technique, or it's on their tutorials, so you can check on Missouri Star, and hourglass with a 4 patch, I think what might be the reference. Okay, then we have a 1/4 is that where our next one is?
Half plus quarter, yeah.
Yeah. So when you have a 1/4 with a 1/2, you're going to look at that you have one piece of fabric you're going to cut as a 1/2 square triangle. So you're only going to add the 3/8 inch. But then you have another piece that's going to be cut twice. So it's going to have the 2 pieces that are going to be cut twice. And so that's going to be measured by the 3/4 inch addition. So this piece, these 2 pieces are with 1/2 inch plus 3/4 inch, okay, with me, and they're sewn together in our usual 1/2 square triangle way, and then they would open up like so. So this would be the 1/2 square triangle. Then this size should be finished square, let's say 2 inches, plus 1/2 inch plus 3/8. That's the size that this is cut. It goes on here, and then you draw a line perpendicular to the seam, and you end up with this. Okay? And this makes a beautiful star when you have it on those 4 sides of your center square. You can do so much with these colors, like super contrast here and real similar here, and it looks almost like it has a depth. It's a really fun triangle combination to make. Okay, did this. All right, we're almost there. Then you have the picture that Kate had on the 1/2 square triangle class. And what you're going to do with that is, if you see a block like this, what you're going to do is look at the smallest 1/2 square triangle, which could be considered this one, but when they get real tiny, we're not going to go there. So let's call it this blue one, all right? This turquoise one. So we'd measure that, and we'd go, okay, it is finished 2.5. So I'm going to cut these 2 fabrics, finished 2.5, so it'll be 3 plus 3/8. So it'd be 3 and 7/8, okay? Then I'm going to go, okay, that's 1/4 of this. So finished 2.5. This finished is going to be 5. So for this piece, I'm going to add 5.5 plus 3/8 and cut a square, cut this triangle, cut these 2, 1 square, and cut it in half, and it would be the same measurement as these squares. And then you start sewing together. So you have this 1/2 square triangle, so these 2 to the angled sides, and so this one to that. There is a fast method, and I always struggle finding it, and you'd think I'd have it printed somewhere, but it's in one of my books, a scrap quilt book. And what they do is they have this on two sides, and then these are rectangles somehow, and they sew down the middle and flip it open, and so you do end up having this a similar effect of what we've done with half square triangles. So there is a method out there for you to search and find an easier way to do it. But that's basically, then to get this little teeny piece, which I finished it and went, oh, you know, it'd be fun to have. And so I put this little teeny piece on, and it's just a stitch and flip. So you have that, so across the diagonal and flip it over. Now you can trim both of these off. You can trim one off. Some people say that if you keep this back piece on, it helps you stay more square if somehow you've made it too much or too little to fold over. So there's, again, the accuracy issue. So if you need that accuracy and you find you're just not getting it the right size, trim this middle piece of yellow out and keep that underside there so that it holds the original square shape. So this is fun. I'm involved in the American Patchwork Sew-Along, Quilt-Along I think it's called actually. And I always think I'll have more time than I do. And so if I have, oh, here we go. I thought I had them. So I can do this. I can do this. And of course I'd have the fourth one. And you know, you have a number of things that you can put together. You can have this square in the middle and these on the outside. You could have these fabrics change. So you have a lot of fun things you can do as you play with the design aspect of these. So they're fun. And okay, so okay. So see, this is my challenge in life is, oh, but I want to tell you about. So a couple of times now in these classes, I've mentioned the Geese in the Pond. And Geese in the Pond is such a fun quilt. And I thought I had one at home, but I must have already given it to the people I made it for. So I made another, and here we go. So from our old class, our other classes, we've talked about 9 patches. So, and notice here, I ran out of this fabric. And it turned out I didn't run out, but I'd already made those. It's like, oh well, this is the way it's going to go. So I have these, and I like when I have stuff that doesn't stay symmetrical or is only symmetrical in one direction. I like to change it up and make, am I doing that? Yeah. And then make it go like that. So see how this line changes directions as it goes around. Then there's not an up and a down and a right and a left. It's all, any way you look at it, it's going to be the same. This is the same way your 9 patch gets made. So it just has that. It just doesn't get cut up in the 9 patch. So these are in between those. And could you put that in there, please? Thank you. And then this and this. And that goes there. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'm like, I have one more. Where does it go? Oh, yes, out there. And then these are the half square triangles. And I just made a giant one. So I have my giant half square triangle, made the line down the middle, sewed on either side. I would not make this in the square X because it's a pretty big, it'd be really big for one. So I'd have to have enough fabric to cut that. And 2, I didn't mention this, but whenever you're making half square triangles, something ends up on the bias. So some seam ends up more stretchy, less squared with the weave of fabric. When you make this method, this is the only bias edge, and you're sewing it when it's still intact. So you're cutting it without the pressure. You're cutting it before you sew it. So the sewing and the presser foot puts more pressure on it, and it can get stretched out. Again, I've done that, and I've made a lot of quilts that way, and they're fine. But if you want it to be really well done, if you want it, and the tinier you make your quilts, little minis, oh, my heart goes, it just is ecstatic to see those little minis and think, wow, those women are not like me. Perfection, it has to be just their breath, you know, it just has to be. Okay, so then you have 12 half square triangles, which means you're going to cut 6 squares to make them, because you'll get 6 sets, sorry, of the 2 colors. And then they go in the corners like this. Now this is a half square triangle. It's not a true flying geese, but because they're lined up with them going in the same direction, it's called geese in the pond. So this is an old block, and you can make it small and put many of them together. Look up geese in the pond on Pinterest. Look it up in books and references that you have. And it's so fast and it's so colorful, and you only need 2 fabrics. But also look and see what it looks like when it's scrappy. It's really fun. And it's a really beautiful quilt when it's just all different. Sometimes it's a little bit more scrappy, like these squares are 1 fabric, the 9 patches another set, the geese are another set of colors. So you might see some scrappiness to it, or you might see a total scrappiness. So that's geese in the pond. I've also included some examples. Look those up on Pinterest and have fun. I have cut this one and can't wait to work on it. But Jacob's Ladder is a fabulous quilt, and it too is super fun. So here is my square that I'm going to cut diagonally, and I will have these half square triangles. Move this out of the way. Jacob's Ladder is a 4 patch. I'm looking at this going, I made a 9 patch. No, it's 2 4-patch strips. So in this quilt, what I did was I got a little of the scrappy effect by having 2 rust colors and 1 light. But a classic Jacob's Ladder is 2 colors. And then again, it can be scrappy. So, you know, you can go anywhere in between total scrappy to just 2 colors you want. And so when you do the 2 strips, you cut them in chunks, as we talked about last time. So you cut them in chunks that are the same width as the strips are, and then you sew them together in a 4-patch. So you end up, I think I got those sewn. I hope I did. Oh, I probably didn't. I thought I'd have time to demonstrate. Sorry. So you end up with your half square triangles and your 4 patches, and then they make the Jacob's Ladder design, the classic design, by the dark coming into or the light coming into the 4-patch. And you can mix and match it. You can set it up in a diamond shape. You can set it up in bars that crisscross. I mean, again, look up Jacob's Ladder on Pinterest and you'll find a bazillion. And so now we have learned, sorry, I do have them. I have them right here. I didn't sew them in complete 4 patches, but here we go. So here's the 4 patch. So I've cut those and then I'll sew those. And we go, yeah, that's right. And then these 2. Like so. And like so. So that's the Jacob's Ladder block with the half square triangles and 4 patches. And that's all it is. But oh my gosh, the beautiful quilts that are out there to make with them. And you can see how it changes when you make it so that this hits the contrast here. So those are fun. So it's a fun block to play with. It creates some fun mix as each block goes together. And then Friendship Star, I showed you examples, and what are some others here? Oh, just your classic 8-point star, like the 60 and 30 degree. They can be made like my blue one that is just a half square triangle for the points. But your square in the middle is going to be 2 of those because the points are a full block of fabric. So that it's bigger. So quick pinwheels. Oh my gosh, this is one of my favorite pinwheels, and boy is it fun. It's a clipped panel and big pinwheels frame it, and that's all it is. It's just as easy peasy as can be. And so you have your half square triangles. You have 4 per pinwheel, and you just, like we talked about before, you take your focus fabric in the middle, or whatever you've got going on, and then take it to your stash and find everything that even kind of sort of goes. It's going to be fine. It doesn't have to be this perfect match. And again, we've talked about taking the selvage edge of your focus fabric and kind of matching up the dots that are on the edge that indicate the colors. Here's a little table runner that has a lot of half square triangles, and it also has a fair number of what you see as half square triangles or stitch and flip. So let me see. This is a square that has stitch and flip on the 2 corners. And then this is a square and a square, so it's stitch and flip also. So it gives the illusion of a half square triangle. So there's lots of ways to get to it without having to make all of the diagonal seams. Yeah, Karen.
Stitch and flip, what is the math involved with adding the other one? It's smaller, but...
Yeah. Let me think out loud. So if your finished square is 2, and you're going to end up using 1 is going to be half of that. You have 1 plus a ½ inch. And I have that on the last handout. Or, yeah, last month's handout. Okay, this is an 8-point star, and it is huge. And so super easy, super fast. Half square triangles are the points of the star here in these littler ones, and here on the outside corners, and wherever the other star points are, I can't find them. Oh no, I'm sorry, I was thinking it was an 8-point star. It was in the middle as an 8-point star, and this is geese in the pond. So it just simply took that middle square and put a design, because it's a great big block. So there's that. Wild, fun. My granddaughter uses that on her bed at our house. This one is very fun, and just want to point out a little issue of this. So the block is each of these background fabrics is a block, but you have to make 2 different blocks. They're mirror images. So you make half of the quilt is this block with these 2 corners having the half square triangles, and then the other one is these 2 corners, and then they connect. Okay? One of the things I do when I look at a quilt on Pinterest is I click on it, I magnify it, and I check where the seams are. So you look real carefully. Sometimes it's hard to find them. So you look at a lot of the blocks and you see where the seams are. Then you can draw it out on graph paper. And once you have it on your graph paper, you're set because you know how big you need to make your quilt. And then you put your design together depending on the size you need. Okay, and then this one I brought last month, but I wanted to bring it again because we now know how to make this completely. So this is completely scrap. And it really was from my scrap, one of my scrap laundry baskets. And the half square triangles, some of them I actually cut the triangle because I didn't have a big enough one to even cut a square. So some of them got cut that way. But most of them are cut either with 1 square diagonal cut or the sew around the outside square and cut the X. Those are my 2 favorites to make half square triangles. And that's all, folks. So, have fun, make a mess, love your fabric, love yourselves. Just enjoy quilting and be present with the process of creative design and choosing colors and all that great stuff. I love quilting. Liberate yourselves. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Do we have a?
We don't have any
Okay.
questions online.
All right. Any questions? I know I packed in a lot. I wanted to give you confidence to take it on. And I also want you to know that you can contact me at any time. If it's not somehow in the information we have, I think my email is. And just even give me a call. I love sewing with people too. And I've gone, the folks who had the Block of the Month class, I know I went to Karen's house and we spent a lot of time here sewing together, and I'm glad to share and work together. It's just fun. That's how we learn. It's that hands-on.
Do you also sew quilts together for people? Do you do like the free
I used to do the quilting. I have a long arm, and I used to do the quilting as a business, but I had some pretty busy things in my life that changed, and I had to drop something, and that's what I did. But I do it for myself still.
Sure.
Yeah. But there are some, oh my gosh, in Missoula, I bet we have 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and also if you're not a member of the Missoula Quilters Guild, the second Wednesday night at the church that's over there, like behind